the Andromedan Council on the planet Hatona
Hmm.
had this. They had all the parties with any interest at all in the Earth and in developing the Earth say, we're going to give you the chance to develop a being that should survive and be the Earthling, and then you train it, you do your whatever you're going to do, and we'll see which ones are best and how that works. And so 12 humans, Lyrans from different planets gave
Okay.
some genes,
Okay.
and they gave and Sutton gave, and that constituted our reasoning system, our cortex, and our limbic system, our emotional system. But what the reptilian Dracos, who contributed rather than going on with their infinite war over Earth, they contributed brainstem. Now, each of these different uh, interests decided that theirs would be ultimately the one that won out,
Okay.
and the people, our humans thought, oh no, emotional, passionate will win out, and of course, ultimately, there was some hope that reason would win out, and that's supposed to control all the lower systems. And the
Okay.
reptilian said, "That's what you think, boy. We're gonna get you in the long run." So let's go to the next
You're
slide.
driving.
I'm
Never move.
driving, but how do you
Over here.
over?
No, no, no. Right here. Click. Okay.
Okay, so so something caused a great big deal where everything on Earth was topsy turvy, and we really know pretty well what happened. That was what we're not sure what all triggered it, but it was probably stones from the sky. But
Okay.
all the shorelines and everything on the Earth got really wiped out, including Atlantis, which was the main home of these Anunnaki, the people that had been uh, the Earthlings that had taken control of the Earth and had a rather high civilization. And you can see
Okay.
by the map that what's left of it is off the northwest coast of
Hmm.
Africa. It actually molded onto the land. Look at
Okay.
the,
Oh, I want
yeah.
to enter. So make notes of what you want to ask questions because we're going to do
Oh, I
about
am. I definitely am. I have my notebook
slide.
right here. Yep, I
Okay.
definitely do.
I got to make a note because I want to make a comment about Atlantis and Toth, both.
Okay.
Make a sheet of. Okay.
Okay, and so it isn't so that the people that were the Atlans who settled Atlantis
Okay.
weren't wiped out. They survived. A lot of them went to inner Earth. There are
Okay.
caverns and tunnels between the caverns that go all over the place. I'll do a whole series on those. But a lot of them settled in Canaan
Okay.
on the Sinai Peninsula in the Mediterranean coasts. And their settlement of Atlantans on Britain and all over North America, all the, yeah, especially we'll see underneath the mounds of the mound builders who came later. That's where these Atlanteans had uh, extensive works. Okay, we can go
Okay.
to the next slide.
Yeah.
Now, in the Sirius system, there was a unity kingdom that
Okay.
these aristocrats and warriors wanted, and they wanted people to do as join our kingdom. We're gonna, and we are really interested in ultimately being able to fight off Draco attacks. And there's several different theories about how it is that they got to this place called Nibiru.
Okay.
Whether, but in any case, they knew that the thing that we're going to call Nibiru, that they came from, this planet, was a result of the explosion of Sirius C. Exploded, and its corpse became Nemesis, which is a
Okay.
red dwarf that we only saw when we had the red lenses to look through.
Okay.
But the other one is that it was Nibiru itself, and whatever sent it coming, whether they knew it and wrote it from the inside, but that's less likely, I think, or it was just a moon of Nibiru that basically crashed into and caused the kind of thing that we're going to see that of Nibiru passing through. We'll look at that more closely in a bit.
Okay.
So what happened on Nibiru determines so very, very much about what's still happening on Earth.
Okay.
They got into a nuclear war with each other, the North versus the South, and it almost killed everybody.
Okay.
And the people that survived were, lots of them were sterile. It was there wasn't much left. They had to, in order to get past that, they had to unify, and they had a big peace conference, and the North and South formed a union. Their war, it wasn't just from what the explosive they used, it was from the holes they made in their atmosphere and the radioactivity that spread all over.
Okay.
They decided they would have a king who would be a military dictator.
Okay.
And the king would either come to the north or the south, and whichever, the queen would come from whichever one lost the drawing. So it was said. So they had that drawing. That's how they did it, rather than go on, because there wasn't many people left. The Klingons were nice enough to pose for this for me. It wasn't Klingons, but a guy named A-N, and you'll see Anunnaki, and we're all tracing back to this guy. He was a general from the North. He won the lottery, and now it was the government was. This is the commander. He tells everybody what to do, and they do what he says. That's the deal.
And that's interesting because
I
like that. I always known him as Anu. That's what I know him mostly by, Anu instead of
Anu's the son.
Oh, it is?
Generation.
Yeah.
I never knew that.
This is years, and this is the beginning of the dynasty. This is the first king of the dynasty that Anu's way down the line. Like,
I always thought they were the same for some reason.
Yeah, that's what lots of people do. So King An had built this magnificent capital, and you'll see these names appear again and again. It's Agade is what this one is called, and they, of course, they use pyramids for power and all that.
Okay. Wow.
And they generated electricity for their spacecraft, and they had full-on electricity. We know that.
Or whatever it was, yeah.
Okay, so this is a logical place to stop. Is that what you're saying,
Well, I'm going to ask
Janet?
some questions. Okay.
Okay, let's go back.
Go back. Here, let me just go back. Here's how you go back. You go, plunk, you see all them. We were at...
yeah, I've always thought that Anu and An were the same. I always thought that, like, whenever I type in An or Anu, I will always see that a lot of people compare them to be the same people or same person. And when I use ETCSL, the website, the Electronic Corpus Sumerian Literature, they just have An in there. They don't have Anu. So yeah, now that makes sense, because I never knew that. I always thought they were the same for some reason.
So on my website, Enki Speaks, I have a detailed genealogy that shows, the 16 generations and the fights when, what do they do when the royal couple don't have any boys? Then the uncles are all fighting for their kids to come. And, it's just like the royals today. But there's 16 generations of that. And then what do they do when there's nothing from the queen? Well, like the king of number 56 or whatever it was having his concubine, and they had a healthy son. Okay, well, let's see And he's dead though, and goes, and
Right.
so they got all these collateral lines, and so by the time we get down to on, yes,
So
Jen.
open your eyes so you can see when your finger raise. So by the time we get down to on, finish your sentence.
But by the time they get to Anu, there have been several different important lines that were still going. One was the line that you'll see from a guy named Alalu, and these were fierce warrior guys. And another line was the one that will ultimately go from a guy named Lama. We'll get to Lama. Okay, and so forth. And then Alalu is before Anu. Okay, so we'll look at all that in this series if we continue with this. But yes, Janet.
I wanted to have a chance to do questions.
Oh, good idea. Good idea.
Okay, so I think, see, I'm a researcher, and I go and I look at things logically, and I'm working on putting everything into sequence myself. So we don't have a time date stamp on when this happened here, but it seems illogical to me that it happened. Maybe it happened several times over and over, but I don't think this is the final sinking of Atlantis. I think some land was sunk because Plato, years later, is talking about it. And before that, after this, Thoth Nagashita talks about how he found the halls of Amenti and how Atlantis was sunk when Thoth Nagashita was walking.
Yeah, it wasn't just one at a time.
So this, and also Elizabeth Montgomery, which is, it's nice to correlate the information. Back in the 80s, all we had was like Elizabeth Montgomery, Edgar Cayce, and early Eric von Daniken's. Sitchin was coming along. And so she had a whole series of, I think it's all channeled. She was using automatic writing about the sinking of Atlantis and how the dinosaurs were interacting with humanity. And so all this stuff correlates. There were definitely Homo sapiens running around with dinosaurs running around on Atlantis. And it wasn't just this battle. We're talking about the humanoid ones that were created by the Anunnaki were running around on what they were calling Atlantis. So this is confusing.
Oh, yeah.
And this would take, it'd be nice if we had scholars all coordinated with each other and we all research things. And then we would do papers and we say, this is what we found out. And then you put all the different hypotheses. And this is why it works and this is why it doesn't work. So maybe we can do that kind of project, at least the three of us.
Yeah, and you know what? That would be great because I promise you that's exactly what I've been trying to find is other people who research and don't just believe one thing, that they have different theories. And it's almost like, taking it apart. You have a piece of a part of history, and your husband has a piece of the history, and I have a piece of the history, and we put it all together, and we find basically the common denominator for all of them. That
we can also throw our hands up and say we don't know.
or that exactly like that. That's basically what my website is about. Is I'm not making any claims. I'm just sharing exactly what I've read. It's not me saying, hey, this is what happened, but hey, this is what I learned from this person. And I researched their material and I found this and this, and it's almost like going through the rabbit hole. It is just, you dig so deep and stuff, and you can get lost in it. I mean, I've created my website. I created my website like 2 years ago, and I've been looking for people to say, hey, I've been asking so many times, hey, I would like to start a discussion panel. That's kind of what I want to do, is like start a discussion panel.
Sign me up.
I'm with it. I'm with it. I can create the questions. If you give me a subject and I'm knowledgeable on that subject, I'll come up with questions, because every book that I have, like I said, basically has a tab of everything that's interesting to me. And I go and research it. I break it down as much as I can. And I try to go as far back as I possibly can to the first written language. Like you said, like Plato wrote about Atlantis, right? Well, we know the Library of Alexandria was destroyed at one time because of the fire, and we know that the Greeks studied a lot from ancient Sumer and the ancient Egyptians. So what they studied, they put into their history text, and that's where you got to, and you can find it like on one of the slides was talking about Series C, right? I did when I researched more about that area, the star system out there. I learned about the Dogon tribe, and I was interested because I was like, yeah, I was so interested about the Dogon tribe because they talk about it is said that those were the first people um, in ancient Egypt, and when they left Egypt, which was Kemet at the time, when they left that area, it was because of they didn't want to be they didn't want to change, they didn't want to become Islam in the Islamic traditions. They didn't want to, they avoided that, so they moved away. And I didn't know that you can find a lot of the history that's in ancient Egypt and Sumer. You can find also in India. I didn't know that either. Like there's a lot of history in it. I know that I believe it was Inanna who was over there in who was in control of in India. Yeah. So it's like you got to take.
We go into Inanna in a later period because she's much further down the line. So this right now that we're covering is ancient history.
Yeah, before the
Anunnaki came to the earth. What did you want to say, sweetheart? I want to give you a
just chance. Earlier, before you switched off the slide about
talk to the people
before she switched off the slide about Atlantis. What I wanted to say that her comment was quite right about it didn't all happen all at once. Right. It's what Silva has in his various writings is talk about how there's a correlation with when the ice ages changed, and you can see when different things happened. And so in some places, the people that's the Vikings that settled the east coast of North America just went there in their boats. It wasn't necessarily anything catastrophic. Only that sometimes it was catastrophic, depending on where the meteorite shower came. And the terrible meteorite showers have a place where there's a window where we pass through the Kuiper Belt and other places where large rocks are likely to get past Jupiter, which usually plays like our guards, with guards and tackles together, and we're the quarterback. Thank God for Jupiter. But anyway, so that it didn't. For some, it happened at once. For some, they did it themselves by Stuart Swerdlow's thing, because they were they heard the Dracos coming up from underneath. They were burrowing from within with their sappers. They zapped them downward and they blew themselves up. Right. And there's other things. So there's probably all of the above, and they've been conflated. But we get a general idea. But the most interesting stuff is that the exact description of what Atlantis, the center of Atlantis, would look like, is a place off of touching Mauritania's coast now. And it's like that looks like remnants of exactly what Plato was describing.
That's interesting.
Over with next year.
And you said earlier about the Homo sapiens being with or any species being with the dinosaurs. I actually seen pictures. I've never been to any of the ancient sites, so I haven't seen them personally, but I've seen pictures online where Göbekli Tepe had pictographs of individuals on type of what could look like dinosaurs. And I was like, when you look at it, a picture's worth 1,000 words. You can look at a picture and people will have their own idea what that picture represents. But you can clearly see from what the idea of what a dinosaur looks like. We've all probably seen Jurassic Park at least once in our lifetime. You can see how those pictures, those dinosaurs on the stones. They have the dinosaurs right on the stones where what looks like humans or Homo sapiens sapiens or whatever species on top of them. And that's amazing to know because they said the last dinosaur age was what, I think like 65 million years ago or something like that. And they say that humanity only been on Earth maybe a couple of million years. There's a big gap between that. If you have pictures of what could look like a dinosaurs and individuals riding those dinosaurs on rock carvings, that right there alone is amazing to know, because when you said that Homo sapiens or whatever were on these dinosaurs, there's actually pictures of that. Who would take the time to do that, at a religious site at that? Gobekli Tepe is supposed to be a religious site, one of the oldest religious sites, and the date keeps going back further and further. They'll say 12,000 years, and they'll say 18,000 years, and then some people will say, more than that, and nobody really knows because there's still more stuff to dig. The more they dig, the older the time period they find. It's really amazing about all that you said.
So Cremo takes us back millions, if not billions of years. Basically, whenever a planet cools enough to be settled, there are beings that are settling. They're excavating and taking samples, and we did a whole series with Lloyd Pye. He was wonderful. He had the child skull. He passed in, I think he was probably taken out. He had quick acting cancer. He said, I have cancer, and he was dead within a couple of months. But anyway, we did an interview on interventionism, where the planet seeded over and over. And so that video got wiped from YouTube. So if anybody out there in the listening audience managed to download that before YouTube took it out, it'd be wonderful to hear that, because Lloyd Pye was such a genius. So Dr. Lessin and Lloyd, and I just sat back and went, whoa.
They'll erase you when you die if they don't dig you.
But anyway, we've had punctuated interventionism, and it's not God creating it. It's like we have different levels of, you remember the whole interview, where different periods. And so it's obvious when someone sits back and just analyzes it. Oh, this was an introduction of a different species, of a different series of beings. And if you look at the story of the Greys, there's one called Alien Interview about Errol the Grey that was taken to the base and interviewed, and she lasted for maybe a year or two, and then she decided she didn't get killed. She left her body, but she left this document saying how we have all the bees and birds and plants, and that's their business. The Greys have this business of, if you want to buy species to fill up your planet, we've got them ready made, because they're geneticists and they create whatever. We can make custom beings for you. So,
it's interesting
that, and that's what it's like. The Earth is like that.
The Greys that they'd be selling bees, because the name of their the planet that they came from was Apis.
Apis, okay.
Which means bees. And they were bombarded, and they went to Earth, and they went all over, and they were in space so long that they became the Greys, and here they are selling bees.
Okay, so that's an aside.
And that's why, and that could be the reason why everybody keeps saying we got to save the bees.
I gotta save the bees. Yeah. So anyway, where was I? So in the Emerald Tablets of those, he says that there was some kind of, he said that the interdimensionals were taking over their council. Okay. And you can tell if they were humanoid, reptilian, or whatever. There was these interdimensional beings taking over the council, and so in his story, he said, we decided to take out Atlantis. The only way to get rid of these interdimensionals is to close up the portal. So it'd be interesting to have how was Atlantis destroyed, and according to this one, that we, all the different stories, how that was destroyed. And then we could just look at it. And also, you need people who have there's always people that have reincarnated. Stories about I have a story that I lived in Atlantis. You know, if you go through hypnosis and you go, oh, sometimes you get it in dreams and memories. And I had one for years where I had lived in Atlantis and I had the waters like this poor picture. I was in the
What's
waters,
your take? What
the
happened?
waters rising. I didn't know what happened because I was just the experiencer, right?
Right.
And the waters are rising and it's like keep going to higher and higher ground. And so we went to the mountaintop and we were at the mountaintop and we could hear all the animals die. It was with somebody, I think it was my lover or something. And we took nothing but ourselves and we're just running. And then at the end, we fell asleep because we were exhausted. And as the dawn was coming, you could see the waters were still rising. And you could hear all these animals giving out their last cry as they drowned and people. And it's like, oh, we're not even, there's no higher ground to go with. We're doomed. And that was my last memory. It's like there was nowhere to run.
What did you learn from that life, honey?
I don't know, honey. I don't want to go into that. But
tell me what you didn't learn from it.
I don't know. I don't want to do that. Stay on screen.
that could be another topic.
Sasha likes to do psychotherapy with people. What did you learn from that? I learned to live away from the shore, but there's nowhere to run. So when you die, you come back in another body. And you
we live on a mountain.
We live on a mountain and there's nowhere to run, nowhere to go. And so someday you're just gonna say, I guess I'm dying.
So you see how the past life can resonate with the present choices.
Anyway, and then I had one Lemuria. So there's the sinking stories. You know, I guess I have a sinking feeling. I die in floods.
And you clean the sinks. It's all perfect.
Okay. Back to this.
But see, what you said makes sense though, because in the ancient texts I've read, you know, I like to use ETCSL. I have the Popol Vuh, I have the Mahabharata, I have the Rig Veda. I have a lot of the ancient texts, and a lot of the texts say when the flood came, there had to be people had to find higher ground, mountains. They had to go higher up to be saved, and I know I practice astral projection. When I was wounded in Afghanistan, I used to have, I was diagnosed with sleep paralysis, and I could never understand what sleep paralysis was. It was scary. I was always seeing these figures in my room. I mean, it was a really scary experience. Then I started looking into what astral projection is, and I noticed that I was able to control myself leaving my body. And at the time, I thought I was just going nuts, going crazy because I have a brain injury. So I thought it was something, very wrong with me. And when I looked into it more and I started reading, and then I started reading about chakra healings and chakras and stuff like that. And, I started meditating. And I have a singing bowl that I use, a Tibetan singing bowl that I'll use. Sometimes I'll put water in it and I'll use it. I'll meditate in my backyard. I'll sit there and do y'all remember the show Home Improvement, Mr. Wilson?
I watched it a little bit, yeah.
So Mr. Wilson used to be that, he used to be that type of person that used to always spend a lot of his time in his backyard. So I do that stuff too. And when I learned about astral projection, I also learned about the Akashic records too, where you can tap into your past lives, I guess. And I started learning about that and reading about that. And in the ancient text, it actually talks about that. I know a lot of people, when I talk to some people about this stuff, I know some people will give me that crazy, like, hey, are you sure you're not taking your medication type thing? And I'm like, this is actually what's written in the ancient text. And people do experience this stuff. I mean, I understand. Go ahead.
I've been astrally projecting all my life. I have experiences going back to the crib. I don't seem to, at that time, not able to consciously control it. But once I'm out, I still travel astrally all the time. So when people ask, how were you abducted? Sometimes they take you physically, but it's very hard for the human body to go in and out of space, and it gets damaged. So oftentimes you have an extraterrestrial, I don't want to call it an abduction, but you have an encounter, and you astrally in your different forms. So it doesn't harm your human body. But I go off planet. I go on the spacecraft all the time. I went to the inner Earth. And you're not limited. You can go back into the past, into an alternative universe. I constantly go to like this one city, and I call it Nibiru, and I know where everything is. It's just like knowing your own town here on Earth. You know, I know where the marketplace is. I know where the museums are. I know where the ancient ruins are. I know where the the town center is. I know all the good food. They have a big place where you can just walk through, and wherever I'm going, I call it Nibiru. It's like they don't have money, so their reward is here, take this, and they try to give away things every day because they just want someone to appreciate their craft. You know, if they paint or if they're a singer, artist, and if they make food, so they go, here, try this, and it's just a way to, all hang out together and talk and exchange because it's beyond. And that's another thing we can talk about is systems, systems of planetary governance. Our system sucked, man. We got all these people starving. Yep. There has to be a higher civilized conscious civilization. We're not even a level 1 in the Kardashev scale. We're like a -1. So how can we become a conscious civilized civilization that celebrates our individuality and diversity? And then I think that's what's holding us back from getting invited to join the Federation, because we're barbarians. Humanity is so barbaric. And if we can start addressing that elephant in the wall, how can we stop being a bunch of barbarians? And I don't want to insult barbarians. I guess that's originally a country barber or something. But anyway, go ahead, Sasha. And talk to the screen. There we go.
Thank you.
There, the screen.
No, it's apparent that we need to embrace the what, honey?
I want you to talk to the audience right there.
We have to say of angry people or the angry parts of ourselves, what do we really need?
Right.
And when you ask and when you address it that way, when people are angry and you address what do you need, it's pretty universal, and it's something that you can work out a cooperative agreement so that other people and you can meet their needs.
Right.
And so everything, a demonic force like the desire to kill other people is only demonic because the natural ability to assert oneself appropriately in the environment is being suppressed. And so all you got to do is give people a fair deal and make sure they have housing and transport and a respect, and that there's justice, and that it really is not difficult, and that monopoly capitalism is an insane system to pit us against each other, that the Anunnaki that I'm trying to teach you about imposed upon us, and were terrifically torn apart themselves by, and they want to stop it in themselves, and they're going to help us stop doing it here before it's too late, they hope.
Yeah. No, that makes sense because there's when I first read the ancient text, I told myself, first I'm going to read the ancient text first, because I wanted to read the ancient text before I read the Bible. And just like we were talking about astral projection, when I've read the Bible many times, I read the Hebrew version Bible, I have the King James version, and I have the New International Version. I also have the Septuagint also. And when you read it, anytime there was an encounter with God, it was either in a dream or a vision. Every time. Jacob's ladder, that's a perfect example. That's when he was in a dreamlike state, and that's when he was able to see God and talk to God. Then you have the burning bush. God was visualized as the burning bush, and I know there's also hidden meanings behind that. It might not necessarily mean everything that what is written down, but one thing that I've always found consistent was it was in a dreamlike state, some way, somehow. Not only just a dreamlike state, but it was on a mountain also sometimes, and it was during meditation also. So it wasn't. And in the Bible it says that the human body and flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom. So the only way you can go to heaven is through what they most of us would consider like a spirit of some type or something like that. And the ancient Egyptians actually talk a lot about that. That's the whole reason why they created mummies. The mummies that they have was created because they was taking them from one place, which was the physical body on planet Earth, and then their soul or whatever would, depending on who you ask, would go to another realm, basically. And it was always interesting to know that when I started learning about astral projection and stuff, is that this stuff is as real as you can achieve. Basically, you can say, if you believe in it enough and if you practice it enough, you can achieve it. I know that certain things were, how can I say it, plants and stuff like that could have helped, herbs and stuff like that helped with that stuff. Yeah. But it was possible to do it. The third eye is a great example of that. From what I understand, with the pine cones and all that, it's supposed to be a reference to your third eye. And it's just amazing that, when I started learning about this, I didn't know too many, and I still don't know too many people who are knowledgeable on this. I know they read some books and stuff like that, but they take the book for its word and they don't actually, not too many people go out there and practice astral projection or even meditate on top of that. So they'll believe what's written in the book, but they don't get that full-fledged experience without practicing it. I mean, practicing astral projection for me was thrown upon me. I mean, like I said, I was wounded in Afghanistan, and when I came back, I had sleep paralysis, and I could not understand why I couldn't move my physical body. But I would see, figures or whatever in my room, black figures, ghost-like or whatever, that may look scary to some people, but it was almost comforting to me. Like, oh, this is a new experience for me. And then I actually started seeing, the more I practiced it, the more I learned how to meditate, the hours that you're supposed to do it in. Is supposed to help you achieve that astral projection a lot easier. And when I started seeing my body rising, or seeing my body when I was rising, I was like, I know I'm dreaming. I gotta be dreaming. And I wasn't, because I could, when I get back into, like, I guess whenever my soul or whatever got back to my body, because they say you're tethered to your body regardless. You can go anywhere you want to, but you're tethered to your body, like a baby's tethered to a woman in her womb with the umbilical cord. And I was like, but they say, once that tether is gone, that means you're separated from your body, and that's when you move on to a next life or whatnot. But I was so scared, and when I see my body just laying there, I was, I get back in, and I'm like, I can't move, and then all of a sudden you're just like, boom! It's like a flashlight almost hitting your eyes. Right. You're back in your body, and you're just sweating, and you're confused and everything else. So it's amazing, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's actually what I've read in the ancient texts a lot.
So Edgar Casey used to meditate like at 4 a.m. And he knew, he let all his people know, I'm meditating at 4 a.m. So they would come to his bedroom. They would gather in a meeting at 4 a.m. A lot of his people who were in his groups. You know who Edgar Casey is, right?
Yeah. I sure do.
Yeah, Edgar Casey started the Association for Research and Enlightenment, and that's over in Virginia. And that's also where the Monroe Institute is, and that's where Robert Monroe was practicing astral projection, and so he was teaching people how to consciously astrally project. So anyway, those two, these are people from the 30s and 40s and 50s. They were doing these studies years ago, and they both learned how teach people how to do it. But part of it was a setting an intention. So if you say, okay, we're going to all meditate at 4 a.m. We're going to meditate on contacting each other.
Mm-hmm.
After a while, they were actually contacting each other. And like Robert Monroe said, when he traveled astrally, he ran into other people that were traveling astrally. So if you learn not to be afraid and you just go, okay, we're going to do this. So I did some of that 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when I was in State College. I had some friends I met since I was at Penn State University. I had an internet account. So we were practicing reaching each other astrally.
Mm-hmm.
And then I ended up finding a lover who was able to project to me, and we had astral sex.
Mm-hmm.
And then we fell in love. And then I left my dysfunctional marriage and I moved to Hawaii. It's all perfect in the divine plan, because I wouldn't have met Sasha if I hadn't moved to Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
Things didn't quite work out with the man that was, and he knew Silva mind control. That's another aspect to look at. They are able to astrally project. And so this is a whole other PowerPoint. How do you master this astral projection? And you know, what can you learn from it, and what do you have to do to protect yourself? And so Nagashita said that when he was traveling, he said you had to beware of the hounds, and you have to travel in squares, not circles. Or I don't know, it's all written up in his book. It's like, if you get out there, you might encounter the hounds, which is what you had in your slide. There's the wolf, and apparently the wolf and I guess they are the Klingons. The Klingons are based on the Wolfen type. They're kind of draconian, and that they're just all power. And then they too got calmed down, and we had Worf and Star Trek. But anyway,